Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today what we thought we'd do is predict what product we think is going to be coming out next in Rush Duel Links. Now there is obviously a chance that a product has already been announced before this video has gone out, and if it has we could just immediately take a look at it and see if I was right. But what I think would make the most sense for the next product to come out would be a super mini box. And why do we say this? Well, the latest box came out to a bit of a whimper. None of the brand new decks have really left their mark on the meta. Some of them have been doing okay. Vulcan has surprised a lot of people and has actually been the best performing deck from the new box. We've also had Buster Blader doing okay and has been seeing a little bit of play in combination with Ice Arc and the Spectral School deck. And we've also seen the Worms seeing a lot of play, but not really making any top 4 positions in any of these tournaments. Plants, on the other hand, has kind of accomplished nothing. It seems to be the worst deck from the new box. So what would make sense to me is that we get a super mini box to try and fix some of the issues of the new decks and try to bring them more wholeheartedly into the meta to keep up with the stronger decks such as Machine, Cyburst, Royal Rebels. So what I thought we'd do first is take a look at the last super mini box, Evolving Rising Heart. And as we can see by the big boy on the screen, this box was supporting Royal Rebels. But not just Royal Rebels, this box also had support for Psychics, it had support for Thunder, and it introduced Zombies into Rush Duel Links. Now Zombies haven't done a whole lot. People have basically played them a little bit with some aggro stuff, but the rest of these 3 decks have all seen some sort of play. Now, Psychic hasn't seen a ton of success, but has been doing okay, especially more recently, as we've just had it hit top 4 in an event. Royal Rebels has been a very, very powerful deck, pretty much since it came out, but Hell Tuning Invasion was a very, very strong, almost tier 0 deck, and Death Doom Requiem is still a very strong deck to this day, so some very good decks there. And Thunder is a deck that did catch people off guard, releasing Trigger Drago and Stormbolt Destroyer very early compared to when they were released physically, and then giving them a very good skill did make the Thunder deck see a lot of success. And even right now, the Thunder deck is still seeing an alright amount of success in the current meta. So one thing to take note of all these 4 different types in this list, that being, again, the Fiends, the Psychic, the Thunder, and the Zombies, is that all of those do match one of the Roa Roman band members. We have Roa on the Royal Rebels, we have Roman on the Psychic, we have Tyler, who plays the Thunder, more specifically he does play the Thunder Beetles, which were released in this set. And then we have Tombs, who plays the Zombies. Now, we didn't get Tombs' primary boss monster, which is Dark Lurker, but I think that's more because the card would be a little bit problematic. It's a 2600 defense monster, it can destroy back row, and it burns for 1000. That card has seen a ton of meta play in the physical game, so I do understand not wanting to release it quite so early. But my point is that all 4 of the decks from this box did match up with the Roa Roman band members. And so what I thought was the next Super Mini could also coincide with another group from the anime, and that would be the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club. So the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club is run by Asana Mutsuba, which is the worm duelist from Yu-Gi-Oh! 7th. And the other members are basically like her friends and her club members. And because of this, I would expect some of these characters' cards to be released in the box. So first off, let's talk about Asana herself. She is obviously the Worm Duelist. We've just had Worms released in the latest mini box. So let's talk about what cards we could get to improve that deck. And the first one we're going to talk about is Constructor Sky Worm Gantry Dragon. Now this is an interesting one because the sleeves for this card are already in the game, which might be hinting or kind of soft leaking the fact that Constructor Sky Worm Gantry Dragon could be coming soon. But what is this card? It is a 2500 attack, 2000 defense, level 8 worm monster. If we have a field spell on the field, we can special summon a Constructor Worm Build Dragon from our graveyard face up to our field, but this turn we can only attack with worm type monsters. So all of the good worm skills basically lock us into using any worms anyway, so that restriction doesn't really mean anything, but this can be a very, very strong effect. Basically we get to summon this out as a 25, if we have our field spell it will gain an extra 400 attack, so it goes up to 29. Then we use its effect to bring back a Build Dragon from the graveyard, which is also a 29. Then we can use Build Dragon's effect to bring back another normal monster that also gains 400 attack. So it can be a way to build a very, very strong board. But doesn't really fix any of the issues with us not being able to really beat set 3 pass particularly easily. But one of the cards that is a really good target for that Build Dragon is Constructor Demolisher Worm Drake Crush. And this is another card that is kind of soft revealed / leaked because this is on a game map in Rush Duel Links right now. But this is just a 2400 attack normal monster. This is the best target other than a legend monster, which I don't think we're going to get just yet, to bring back with Constructor Worm Build Dragon. This comes back as a 28, which means you can quite competently build a board of 29, 29, 28, which is a very difficult board to break without something like a Doom Metal to wipe it. So again, it's not going to be able to contest maximums very easily. It still needs something like a TSA, and we still can't beat set 3 pass because none of these cards have piercing or multi-attack or destroy any cards, but it's still a very good way to build a very strong board. And the next card I think Worms could get is Silver Mountain of Blisstopia. This is basically the second Worm field spell. There are a few more that they do get beyond this, but I think this is the one that would be most likely to come out. So we can activate this card if your opponent has a face-up level 7 or higher monster on their field. While this card is face-up in the field zone, if a player would tribute summon a level 7 or higher Worm-type monster in attack position, they require only 1 tribute. So, in my opinion, this card isn't as good as the Peaks of Blisstopia, but this does give you a different way to build the deck. This basically allows you to play more high-level monsters and be able to summon them a lot easier in exchange for that attack boost. So the only real negative here is that means your 2500 attack monsters won't really have a good way to beat other 2500 attack monsters, but this would let you use 7 or 8 high-level monsters without having to worry about bricking too much. And the last Worm card we're going to talk about is the Constructor Fighter Mixer, and I think a lot of people will agree that Worms just don't have enough effect monsters right now, and I think Mixer is a good option to bring out. So if a field spell card is on the field during the turn you normal summon this card, we can send the top card of the deck to the graveyard. Then if we send a Worm type normal monster to the graveyard by this effect, you can draw 1 card. So this is basically just a plus. And this kind of does a lot for what we're trying to do. If we're using our maximum excavator skill, we can only gain that piercing if our deck has 10 or less cards in it. This is a great way to get 2 cards out of our deck because we will mill 1 and then ideally we will draw 1 more. So this is a good way to get through and try and find what we're looking for whilst also emptying our deck. So I think this would be a really, really good pick, especially because Worms right now aren't really a top tier deck. They're not really performing that well. So I think giving them this tool would actually be pretty good. And it's not super generic because we have to hit a Worm type normal monster. That means other decks won't be able to make use of it. So I really think Constructor Fighter Mixer would be an excellent addition. Other than this, they could possibly get another normal Worm, because there are other normal Worms available. The only problem being they are the Fire Worms, which means they are from Go Rush, and they might want to hold off from releasing those until we get to the Go Rush era, but they are an option. They could bring one of them forward to give us an extra beta, because any of our kind of high-ish attack monsters like 1300 to 1500, getting the extra 400 boost from Peaks of Blisstopia does make them a pretty good aggro tool. And now we're going to talk about the next member of the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club, that being Galleon Townsend and his boss monsters. So we already have one of his boss monsters, that being the Shield Boring Kong, which does have a big fat limit 3 slapped on it. But his other boss monster is Drilling Mandrill, which is an interesting boss monster. So during your main phase that you normal or special summon this card, we can change face down defense position monsters on the opponent's field to face up attack position up to the number of face up machine type monsters on the field. The original attack of the monsters changed to face up attack by this effect becomes 0 until the end of the turn. So this card has terrible stats. 1700 attack and 2000 defense for a level 7 monster is really bad. But his effect is actually pretty good. Now, I think one reason why we might not see this card is, one, this is kind of a bit of an OTK machine, because we can change face down defense position monsters on our opponent's field who face up attack position equal to the number of machines on our field, as well as the fact those monsters attack becomes 0. So if your opponent is going defensive and they set 3, and we have 3 monsters out, we can use this, split them all up, make them all 0 attack basically directly 3 times, and kill our opponent. As well as the fact that this does also work with machines, and machines is one of the strongest decks right now. I think you could quite happily slot 1 copy of Drilling Mandrill into a current machine deck and have it as just a way to just close games very, very quickly. Now, obviously, if you're behind, this card is completely useless, so it might actually see no play at all. But it is just one of those cards that can just end a game out of nowhere, and it is kind of the last Galleon card that we don't have. So if we did want to just kind of fit with that theme of just getting the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club members, this would be one of the cards to bring out. And now going on to the next member, we're going to talk about Shubal Quill, or more specifically, Pidge Trap. Because Shubal Quill manages the dual disc, but the actual duelist is a pigeon called Pidge Trap, and his boss monster is Night Vision the Phantom Pigeon. So this is a 2200 attack, 1500 defense, level 7. Already, not good stats. But if we have a trap card in our graveyard, we can send the top card of our deck to the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to the number of trap cards in your graveyard times 200 until the end of this turn. So this is kind of like a worse Seven's Road Magician, kind of. Has higher base stat, but it only gains 200 attack for each card in the grave, and they have to be trap cards instead of monsters, so it's a little bit awkward. But then if we have 5 or more trap cards in our graveyard, we can inflict 1000 damage to our opponent. And as we've seen, burn strategies are a lot stronger in Duel Links because of the 2000 less life points. We've already seen both Noodles and Vulcan performing a lot better than they ever did physically because of the life point reduction. So having access to another burn card could also kind of come out of nowhere and be a very strong meta threat. Night Vision also is a trap focused deck, which Konami have been a bit weird with trap cards in Duel Links because we haven't been getting very many of them. I do feel like Konami really doesn't like trap cards because they feel they slow Rush Duel down, so maybe they would try and avoid this card and its archetype specifically to try and avoid putting a load of extra traps in the game. But one of the other monsters in the deck is Blasting Bird. So this is reveal 2 spell traps from your hand. This turn, this face-up card can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a winged beast type monster in attack position. So this is just a good way to try and get your winged beasts out. Now notably this does work quite nicely with some other winged beasts as well, things like Volt Condor, and you could also use this with Ice Arc. So this would be a kind of multifaceted card to work in quite a few different decks. So I think this would be a great addition to put into the game. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the trap cards, and we'll start with Clowning Cuckoo Clock. So when your opponent normal summons a monster and you have a face-up winged beast type monster on your field, we can special summon 1 Night Vision the Phantom Pigeon from our graveyard face up to our field, and then gain 1500 life points. Now 1500 is quite a lot. That is a quarter of your life points in Rush Duel Links. That's a big boost, as well as getting a 2200 attack body from the graveyard is not too bad. Overall, this trap card isn't fantastic, but what we can do is get a monster out to the field, and then if we also have like a negate attack or something, we can then protect our monster, get round to our next turn, burn our opponent for 1000, gain that big attack boost, and kind of get everything going. So Clowning Cuckoo Clock, actually pretty good. And then we'll talk about a really strong trap card, Bruku Hearted Pigeon. Now this is a card that has even recently seen a bit of meta play, because this has been seeing play in Harpies, because again, it's just generic winged beast support. But when your opponent normal or special summons a level 5 or higher monster face up, while you have a face up winged beast type monster on your field, change 1 attack position monster on your opponent's field to face up defense position, then inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So again, a nice little bit of burn, won't say no to that. But this is primarily really strong, and will be strong going forward because being able to react to monsters' summons can be very powerful. As we go forward, we will get more and more monsters that when they're summoned out to the field will then have an effect which can mess with your back row, or we'll get cards that turn off traps during the battle phase, etc. So if your opponent then does commit to summoning a big card, and again this will include fusions because it's just level 5 or higher and does count special summons, we can then change those monsters to defense. So this would actually be a fantastic tool to come out to help with fusions, which we do expect to be coming sooner rather than later. But yeah, Bruku Hearted Pigeon, fantastic trap card, might even be a little bit too good, especially with fusions just around the corner. And then we'll talk about the last trap card we're going to talk about, and that is Counter Cannonball. Now, Counter Cannonball is a card that you've probably seen already. A lot of the NPC duelists do play this card. This is technically a Pidge trap card, and it's maybe a little bit too good to come into the game. So when an opponent's monster declares an attack, send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. That's quite a steep cost, having to basically keep a card in your hand during your opponent's turn. But we can inflict damage to our opponent equal to the level of the attacking monster times 200. So the maximum this would be is 2000 on a maximum monster, which is pretty good. Basically being able to take off a third of your opponent's life points is really strong. But more often than not, this is probably going to be more like 1400 to 1600, which is still a lot. Realistically, I think if we had Counter Cannonball at 3, it would create a very powerful burn meta. I think this card coming out would make Vulcan suddenly become very good, and anything else that does have a burn type strategy, such as Night Vision itself, would suddenly be very strong. And I feel like the 6000 life points are really going to make cards like this be a big question mark as to whether or not they will ever actually come out in Rush Duel Links. So I don't necessarily think this card is going to come out, but this would be good Vast Vulcan support, and this would be really good if we do decide to bring out Night Vision. Next up, we'll talk about the next member of the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club, that being Catapilio Elephantus. Now, we do already have one of Catapilio's cards in the Mega Elephant, but there is one of his cards that we didn't get access to, and that is a field spell called Beast Battlefield Barrier. So while this card is face up in the field zone, face up monsters on the field lose 200 attack, so every monster on both players' fields lose 200 attack. And face up beast type normal monsters on the field gain 400 defense. Now, I don't necessarily think this is a good card. I don't think this is necessarily even a healthy card, as it does promote just kind of stalling. But this is a Heavy Cavalry Duel Club card, and this is basically the only thing from Catapilio that we don't already have. So this card could come out, and I guess it's going to come out at some point, so why not put it in this Super Mini? And now we're going to move on to some predictions that are a bit more kind of out there. I don't feel as confident about these, but the first one we're going to talk about is going to be Diankito, the Security Master. So recently we did get a skill rebalance that did change the Aqua skill to specifically work with anything that wasn't a Water Aqua monster. Basically foreshadowing that we would get Aqua monsters that weren't light and weren't water coming soon. And the obvious monsters those would be the Dark Aqua monsters, and more specifically Diankito, the Security Master. So again, this wouldn't really fit in with our idea of the box only having cards from the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club, but this would make sense based on the fact that we did get that skill change. For Diankito, the Security Master, send one card from your hand to the graveyard, look at your opponent's hand, send one card from it to the graveyard, then if you sent a level 7 monster to the graveyard by this effect, gain 1000 life points. So it's fine. Being able to rip a card from your opponent's hand can be okay, especially if our hand is stuffed with cards anyway. Other than that, this is basically just kind of worse than the other Diankito in a lot of ways, just because you're not always guaranteed to gain that 1000 life points. But overall, not really anything special about this card, but I thought we would mention it. And then we have some of the other kind of Dark Aqua cards. We have Kanan, the Security Guard. This is just a 1400 attack, 0 defense, but it's dark instead of light. And then we have the Guarding Mermaid, which again is 1200 attack, 0 defense. Not really much to talk about. But there is one other boss monster that Mimi does have, which if we did get this little bit of Mimi support, could come out as well. And that boss monster is Vice Jacker. So this isn't necessarily actually a Mimi card, but I don't really want to go into the intricacies of the Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's anime. Basically, Mimi kind of played this card. Vice Jacker is a machine monster, level 8, dark monster, 1500 attack, 1500 defense, for a level 8. Really not that great static, but we can pay 1000 life points and one face-up level 8 dark attribute monster on your field can make a second attack this turn. So realistically, this card isn't very good. It's never really seen any play. Unless it got a skill to go with it, it would probably be terrible, but we thought we'd mention it because again, this was kind of used in the same episode that we did see the Diankito, the Security Master. Now, if we did get some of these Dark Aqua monsters, what we could do is see more spells and traps come out. And one of those could be Party Time Disco Ball. This is the card that was actually released in the very first Rush set in the physical game. We've still yet to see it in Rush Duel Links. But when your opponent normal summons a level 5 or higher monster, we can special summon one Aqua type monster from our graveyard face up to our field. So this is just a good way just to get 2500 bodies out of the graveyard and back onto the field, which I personally think would be fantastic because the Aqua deck has been struggling a little bit in Duel Links, and this would be a really nice buff. Since realistically, I don't see Diankito, the Security Master, Kanan, the Security Guard, or Guarding Mermaid really changing anything in any kind of meaningful way. But another trap card we could get is Imprisoned Beautiful Witch. So when your opponent normal summons a monster while you have a face-up level 8 or higher Aqua type monster in your field, we can shuffle up to 5 monsters from your opponent's graveyard into the deck. Now this is going to be specifically really good against something like machines, because machines like to have a lot of cards in their graveyard to be used as costs for the effects of Mirror Innovator and Surge Bicorns. By messing with their graveyard quite a lot, we could actually set them back quite a bit. So this could be a pretty cool card, and it also has an additional effect that if your opponent has a face-up spellcaster monster on the field, you can shuffle up to 5 additional monsters from your opponent's graveyard into the deck. Again, not going to be too relevant, but this does mess with 7's Rogue Magician, so I guess that is something. And the final Aqua trap we're going to talk about is Bursting Your Bubble. So when an opponent's monster declares an attack targeting your face-up level 8 or higher Aqua type monster, the attacking monster loses 600 attack until the end of this turn. Then if your opponent has a face-up spellcaster type monster on their field, one face-up monster on your opponent's field loses 1,000,000 attack until the end of this turn. This is kind of a sub-theme that some of the Aqua cards have, which are they tend to be very anti-specific types, and these two that we talked about today are anti-spellcaster ones, but as we go forward they do get some anti-machine ones and a couple of other anti-types as well. And one final Aqua card that they could release in order to actually try and make Aquas really, really strong is Brickfo Nyan Nyan. This would be another Go Rush support card brought forward, but they already did that with Fashion of Faith, so they could also do that with Brickfo Nyan Nyan. So this is during the turn that you normal summon this card, place one card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. One face-up monster on your opponent's field loses 500 attack to the end of this turn. Then we can add a level 7 or higher Aqua monster from our graveyard to our hand. So this would specifically be really good because if we did get an extra Aqua boss monster to be used with this, we would have plenty of targets to get the Brickfo Nyan Nyan's effect off, be able to keep getting them back to our hand so we just constantly have boss monsters ready to use. And weakening your opponent's monsters by 500 is also a great way to break 2500 stalemates. So the next character we're going to talk about is another one of the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club, but not one of the primary members. So we've already talked about Asana, Galleon, Shubil, Pidgetrap, and Caterpillar, but there is one more member in Terra Nidalina. So Terra is listed as one of the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club members, and I guess technically is, but isn't really one of the core members, but they did duel around this time in the anime, so their cards could technically come up, and she is a Fire Pyro duelist. So her main boss monster is Magmax Mantle Vader, 2400 attack, a little bit shy of that 2500 that we would like to see realistically, 1500 defense. We can send one Pyro-type monster from our hand to the graveyard, destroy all face-up defense position monsters on the field with the same level as the monster sent to the graveyard to meet this requirement. Now, if everything goes very, very well, this can be a really strong effect. But we have to send a Pyro-type monster from our hand to the graveyard. All of our opponent's monsters that we want to destroy have to be in face-up defense, so we'd really have to have a way to force them into face-up defense, so like block attack or something along those lines. And then they have to match the level of the card that we also sent to the graveyard, which means we need all of our opponent's monsters to be the correct level if we want to get more than one pop with this. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through for potentially a good reward, but I just don't think this card is ever realistically going to do more than pop one card sometimes. So not a huge fan of it personally. Her other boss monster is Mag Massage. So again, very low stats, 2100 attack, 2100 defense, level 7. We can send it to 4 cards from our hand to the graveyard. That's never really a good sign. One face-up level 4 or lower monster on either side of the field, so level 4 or lower, gains attack equal to the number of cards sent to the graveyard to meet this requirement times 500. So I guess if we had a 1500 vanilla, we could technically boost it by 2000 up to 3500, which is, I mean, that's okay. Is that worth your entire hand? Probably not. Again, Mag Massage, not a very good card, unfortunately. And then we have Arrow Magma Bear. So we can send up to 2 cards from our hand to the graveyard. There's that hand cost again. Gain life points equals the number of cards sent to the graveyard times 300. So gain up to 600 life points for cards from your hand. Unfortunately, just a bad card. But notably, this is an Earth Pyro card, and that will come up in a little bit. Next up, we have An Magma Bear. So if you have no other monsters on your field, place a Pyro-type monster from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck. Add a Pyro-type normal monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a little bit awkward, but we can use this basically to plus us and then get an extra body to tribute, and the best body for that is Su Volcano, which is another Earth Pyro card. This is basically the target that she uses in the show. Next up, we're going to talk about Earth Pressure Explosion. So when an attack position Pyro-type monster on your field is destroyed by an opponent's attack or their trap card effect, very specifically trap card effect, special summon one Mag Massage or one Magmax Mantle Vader from your graveyard face up to your field. Then if you have an Earth attribute Pyro-type monster in your graveyard, you can gain 1000 life points. So again, if we have the Bears or Su Volcano, we can get the extra 1000 life points, which is okay. The monsters that we cheat out, unfortunately, again, only have 2100 attack and 2400 attack, so they're probably just going to get destroyed, but depending on when you play this, this could be okay. But again, a lot of hoops for not really much gain. And then we come to the next character we want to talk about, and that is a character called Janko. So Janko comes from the same school as all of the rest of the characters we've talked about today. Well, I suppose everyone except for Mimi, and that's why I think he could theoretically be included here, but again, we are stretching a little bit at this point. And he plays Insects. So first up, we have Ants running about, we have the United Ants, and we have the Oppressed Ants. These are the huge revolution cards, basically as retrained as Insects. So again, none of them are particularly good. Notably, they are all 100 attack level 1 monsters. Then we have their boss monster, Ant Rebellion of the Rebellion, a level 7 monster with 100 attack and defense. But we can pay 100 life points, that's not too bad. All attack position insect monsters with 100 or less attack on your field gain attack equal to the number of monsters on your field times 800 until the end of this turn. So if we have 3 monsters and they're all insects with 100 attack, all of them will gain 2400 attack, boosting them all up to 2500 attack. So 3 2500 attack monsters is not bad. If we can kill our opponent in that turn, that's fantastic. If we can't, at the end of our turn, they're all going to drop down to 100 attack, and then we are going to get absolutely destroyed on the crackback. So not particularly good, but maybe if we get a good skill, you never know. And then we'll talk about some of their traps. So we have Antiberti Flag, which is when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, we can special summon an insect monster with 100 or less attack from your hand or your graveyard face up to your field. So realistically, all of our monsters have quite bad stats that have 100 attack, but we do have one that does have 2500 defense, that being Metal Armored Ant, which is not too bad to summon off of that, and I guess we could get this card alongside them. Then the other trap is the Giant Revolution. When your opponent's monster declares an attack where you have 3 face-up insect-type monsters with 100 or less attack on your field, destroy all face-up level 8 or lower monsters on your opponent's field. So this is a Mirror Force, but notably it's level 8 or lower, so this will not work on maximums, this will not work against Dragonic Resonance boosted dragons, and this will not work against fusions, or at least most of them, because most of the fusions that come out will be level 9 and higher, that will be out soon. So okay at the moment, not so good going forward. And that is all the primary characters we want to talk about, but there were just a couple of little cards I wanted to talk about as well. The first one being Printing Presser. This belonged to a character called Scoop Pittman, and this again was one of the cards that was originally released in the first set in the physical game. The only reason I bring this up is because this is an Earth Machine, and we do have Galleon, who is an Earth Machine player, so potentially this could come out here. But I think at this point, Konami might be saving this card because it does get you Fusion later, and they'll wait until the Fusions are out and then release it alongside its Fusion. The other card I want to talk about is Legendary Swordsman Buster Blader. Again, I think this is unlikely to come out now, but if they wanted to support one of the decks from the previous box, just slapping a single copy of Legendary Swordsman Buster Blader as a UR would be a great way to sell the mini box, because I think everyone would want to pick this card up. But I don't think Konami necessarily want to release a 2600 attack base monster that isn't a legend just yet, but they could do, and then the Buster Blader deck would see a massive surge in popularity. I think it would be a fantastic addition, as long as it doesn't make the deck too strong. But those have been my predictions. Now, don't forget that if we do get a Super Mini as the next product release, Super Minis only actually contain 20 different cards. There are only 3 URs, 5 SRs, 5 Rs, and 7 Ns, which means a grand total of only 20 cards is not really necessarily going to shake up the meta in a big way. So realistically, we couldn't get all of the cards that I've spoken about today. So I think the ones that are likely to come out are going to be the ones associated with the Heavy Cavalry Duel Club. And I think we could potentially see some of those Aqua cards. I think Legendary Swordsman Buster Blader would be a fantastic inclusion, but we also might see something that does catch people a little bit off guard, like the Guard, for example, which did come out as just kind of a meta staple. Well, it wasn't necessarily a staple, but it was a card that could slot into any deck and did have decent use against what was currently meta at the time, and that was Hell Tuning Invasion. So obviously the Garb is very good into that specifically. As for what we could release right now, it's a little bit more difficult to predict, just because we have a lot of different style of decks doing quite well right now, and it's hard to pick just a single card that could come out and be a good deterrent to like the 3 strongest decks right now. But that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.